In Book 5, Aristotle says justice is the mean active condition of the soul out of which people are inclined to perform just actions. So justice is the mean condition between an excess and a deficiency, and injustice is the result of an excess or a deficiency. Because of this, prudence is an intellectual virtue that is in accord with practical reason. Injustice also results when somebody wants more than their fair share, or goes beyond their just qualities. Though if someone who acts out of anger, they're not an unjust person, rather they're just wicked, which is also unjust because you're acting beyond the mean. As previously mentioned, a person can act unjustly voluntarily, involuntarily, or non-voluntarily. So somebody voluntarily actions are intentional or unintentional, and one can act virtuously and not realize it. One's actions may end up virtuously and not realize it, and the same condition goes for vice. If someone acts unjustly out of a miscalculation, then it's inadvertent, and they can't be held accountable for it because they didn't really realize it, and it's just out of miscalculation, though that is out of their own lack of prudence, but it's not as bad as other cases, which I'm going to mention now. So if the person acts knowingly and out of their vice and doesn't bother to make the calculation, then they're acting out unjustly because they didn't take any thought. So Aristotle's trying to show the point that the lack of contemplation is what results in an injustice. And finally, when someone acts out with the intention to harm others, he's just wicked and is also unjust for acting out on the excess and deficiency, which I just mentioned a bit ago. And if somebody acts intentionally because of their anger or spite and etc., that's also unpardonable because of their lack of ability to control themselves and their emotions as a just person would. Because again, they're not staying to the mean. In Book 4, Aristotle, pretty much at this point, he's going through the various ethics and the individual codes. And okay, for the codes of the self, they're going to be as follows: courage, temperance, generosity or magnificence, greatness, honor or ambition. Now, courage is a virtue to Aristotle because it's the mean between haste and cowardice. A brave individual would be one who faces their fear for the right reasons in an upright manner, and it's for the sake of a noble cause. Temperance is a virtue, of course, because it's a condition that allows one to act rationally against desire and their impulses. A person susceptible to their desires would be quick to submit to them and be pained when they try to go against them. Whereas a truly temperate person, through their virtue, would be able to resist such temptations, and they'll be fun in doing so because their ability to reason. Generosity is also a virtue because it's the mean condition between being prodigal and also being miserly. To Aristotle, it's important to be generous with your neighbors, but it's always supposed to be at a certain time. Temperance is the key. Like, it has to be between a good amount of time, and what you are generous with, it has to be in a moderate amount and a just amount, and it has to be to the right time. I think I just said that actually. And with the right person, so it all has to be it has to be in balance completely. And greatness also is a virtue, and it's because it consists of someone deserving honors and who accepts them. This is to set a good example for others to see the benefits of a virtuous life in order to give them incentive and have a reason to be virtuous. And the final one is honor, and that's included because it results in ambition, and ambition will help people just strive to be more virtuous, and it's just beneficial for that cause. There are also societal virtues, and they are friendliness, truthfulness, wittiness, and the ultimate is justice, of course. Friendliness is part of the societal virtues because Aristotle says they're the mean between being too flattering and being combative. In order to think of it in regard to trying to maintain friendships. Truthfulness is a virtue because it's the mean between being too modest and being a braggart. It's not good to be too modest, which is interesting because most religious morals stress the idea of being modest rather than being a braggart. So it's going towards more to a deficiency, and of course Aristotle doesn't favor that. So there should be a middle ground between being too prideful in your actions or talking about them too much, but also don't not mention them. Be modest. Don't be modest, but just speak of them in the right time, in the right place. It's also good because, again, it helps people see the benefits of a virtuous life and then also want to be virtuous. Wit is also a virtue because it's the mean between being humorous and being amusing. So I guess he wants to keep a good balance between that for the sake of communication with others. And justice is the ultimate virtue because it unites every other virtue, so the societal ones and the ones that should be instilled in the self. I would also like to note that friendships, Aristotle says, are essential to attaining the good life, which is why I believe he stresses these societal virtues like wit, truthfulness, friendliness, and etc. Well, there's not much left first, and justice. So just to give a little overview on that, because friendships are a big section in the ethics. There are 3 types of friendships. One is based on utility, the other is on pleasure, and the final is based on virtue. So the first 2, utility and pleasure, they're completely accidental, Aristotle says. And he says the reason for that is because as soon as the utility and pleasure runs out of the friendship, it's no longer useful. So in other words, it's not really genuine. Whereas friendship for virtue is the most righteous, he says, because both parties can continuously work on improving their virtue, and it can be a continuous process. I would also like to note that the point of Aristotle's ethics is not to make a list or a set of standards or ethical guidelines. For example, let's say like Immanuel Kant with his categorical imperative. It's not a doctrine for people that's set in stone for people to follow. Rather, it provides the paint for a picture, like just to provide virtues that he believes one would excel in virtue and attain the good life. There are also some questionable concerns in the ethics. For example, in Book 5, Chapter 2, it says you have to be equal to be treated equally, and equal people get equal things. Of course, it's not limited. It could be taken a different way. It could be because on equal levels. It's not just people not being on equal levels, but equal level on the topic of an argument and things like that. He also mentions that women and slaves and children they don't get to fully exercise their virtues, and thus they get a lesser share of nobility in the wealth. So that's another concern. I mean, that's something to think about. And also, higher classes get the most amount of leisure to practice virtue because they have more room for contemplation. So they're able to practice more and attain the good life more easily than, say, a proletarian, since they have to constantly work and there's usually not a whole lot of time for leisure. And also another thing to think about is why friendships are so essential to the good life. Because somebody virtuous would be complete in a sense, and as a result there seems no need for the inclination of friendships. But of course, I open the floor to you guys. I would love to hear from you, or if there's something that's not clear. Again, I get really nervous on the cameras. I'm not sure why, but yeah, if something isn't clear, I would be more than happy to clarify. If there's a part of the book you would like to let me list in detail, or a section you're not sure about, I would be more than happy to help. Like I said, I have an extensive amount of notes, and I can easily access the book in the library. That's it.